Hey customizers! We're coming in on the final steps of our Sky Patrol MOBAT project. So what's gone on since the last episode? A few days have passed, and I've let the paint just sit. So this Molotov stuff is amazing, but we're coming up to a little bit of an issue with it, in that I haven't found a clear coat yet that can go on top of this. Most clear coats, when they're advertised for being good for chrome, will actually dull the sheen a little bit. So what I do with my Molotov vehicles, my Sky Patrol collection, I've got about 6 vehicles I think so far, is I can put stickers on them and everything else, but I'll try to not handle the chrome parts as much as possible. This has been able to cure for 4 or 5 days now. I haven't moved forward on the project yet. And as you can see, it still retains its shine here. We have some marking from me putting the turret on there and checking it, but I'm not concerned about that because it will disappear. And in its application, remember the secret to this stuff is having it thin 50-50 with lacquer thinner, so 50% lacquer thinner with 50% Molotov chrome. The other thing being is dialing down the pressure on your airbrush to about 10 psi. Also, what you want to do is make sure that this stuff goes on pretty thick. We don't want to have runs build up, but this stuff needs to go on thickly, and it might take you more than one session to do it in order to build up this mirror shine without having any fogginess on it. And we are technically using the product in a volume at which I don't think it was originally intended to be used for. It was originally in a marker format to fix up little chrome details on cars and stuff. But somebody said, hey, what happens if you airbrush this stuff wholesale? What I am going to show you here is the bottom. And as you can see here, the chrome hasn't really set up all that well down here because I didn't want to waste too much of the chrome on something that wouldn't rarely be seen. It is here in some good effect here. But I didn't take the time to really pull it out and have it look as nice as the top. The reason is that when this sits on the hull, it's going to do what I wanted it to do, which is reflect some light back and forth. Other than that, you're not really going to see it. So this chrome doesn't need to be as well set up as the other. So you can see I was pretty sloppy with it. But I want you to see all of the ins and outs of this process. And to date, even though I haven't clear coated this, that might be setting off some alarm bells for some people, and I totally understand that. But what I'll tell you is, looking at my other Sky Patrol vehicles, there hasn't been any tarnishing or any oxidization or anything like that. So some of these vehicles I've had done for maybe a year already, and they're absolutely fine. So what I'll say is, don't be shy to not clear coat this chrome. Just leave it as is, keeping in mind that when you touch it, you're technically depositing skin oils and stuff on it. So maybe keep the barehanded contact of this to a minimum. Do what you want at the end of the day, but that's just my 2 cents on it. And I've still got one little spot of paint to touch up in there. I touched it up with a brush around in here for the overspray. This I will be clear coating. The cannon will be clear coated, but I'll be doing it by hand. I don't feel like masking this off. According to other videos, it can be masked off and sprayed around and all sorts of stuff, but I've got bad luck when it comes to that stuff. So if a product's not going to function the way it's intended, it's going to be me who discovers that. So I'm going to brush coat this with clear coat, and as we know from our brush painting series, that's no problem. So I wanted to show you that, and I'll even show you actually the effect I was telling you about with the bottom of the turret. So there's the hull there. And once I put the turret on, you can see that it's still reflecting light back there. So light's bouncing in and off of it. You can still see the reflection of the lower hull in the bottom of the turret. We just don't need it to be as nice as this is right here. And just to bring your attention to this product again is, look at that. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, it's amazing. It was mind-blowing the first time I did it. So I hope you're having as much fun with it as I am. And I've got the back panel seated in there already. So I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself, because as we know, when we come close to the end of a project, we get super excited and just want to skip steps and do it. But what I will be clear coating is the hull. So the hull has the road wheels reattached, and I'm trying this out for ease of spraying rather than putting a Q-tip on each and every one. I've reseated them, and the good news is after letting the black paint cure for a few days, there's been little to no paint removal from shoving the wheels on there. So the wheels look good from all angles here, at least in my opinion. I've left the battery compartment as per usual unpainted, because I will eventually make a battery cover if I don't find one. And I'm going to clear coat the black hull and the gray road wheels here. And this is the part of the Sky Patrol MOBAT that won't be chrome. on top of the cannon and the back plate as well. So I've already sat it together, and I don't want to spoil that for you because that's going to be the final reveal. But I've pieced it together without the treads on, and what I'll say is I'm very happy with the color balance that I've used here. There is no white on this project. Although white, I mentioned as a Sky Patrol color, it really had no place here because for the most part in analyzing what colors went where on Sky Patrol, there was mixed results. So it wasn't a matter of all detachable accessories like missiles being white because on the Sky Havoc, they're all brown. So what I did was there wasn't really a place to combine the white with anything else in a way that I liked. So I left it off. For you, if you find something that works, then again, with all these customs, right, they're pieces of art, if you will. So it's dealer's choice on what you want to do. And I'd love to see the work. So I kept white off of this one, so it kind of blends in with the Sky Havoc a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't think I own, well, I know I don't own a Sky Havoc, so I can't compare it for you. But if you look up references on the Sky Havoc, you'll see that's the kind of the color balance I was going for. And I think it carries well nicely. So enough about parts talk. Let's talk about putting on clear coats through an airbrush. So here we have a Model Master Gloss Clear. It's an acrylic, and like anything else through an airbrush, you're actually going to thin this with thinners. The reason being is that just like anything else, you've got to make it thin enough to go through an airbrush. Now this being a gloss clear, this is actually going to be a good time to show you the bonus, or not the bonus, the advantage of mixing outside of your airbrush. So mixing in a little clear cup, which I will grab right now. And what I like about it is anything that's gloss tends to be more thick, more gummy, if you will, than a flat paint or a semi-gloss paint. And the gloss clear is no exception. This can be brush painted on. It will be brush painted onto the can on the turret there. But when thinning this and any gloss, you'll have to use more thinner. There are other tricks of the trade to thin gloss paints. I don't employ them, but I encourage you to go take a look on YouTube and do a search for thinning gloss paints and see what other modelers and hobbyists have come up with, because they are, from what I can tell anyway, good strategies. But we're just going to use traditional thinners here. I'm going to be using Tamiya thinner with this. And it may seem counterintuitive thinning a clear, but the thinner itself will dry clear. So it won't affect as far as I can tell anyway, the sheen of this. And the good thing about using a gloss coat, what I've noticed so far, is that you actually have to build it up in layers like you would color to get a true gloss. So I'm not going to put as many layers of this on the finished product so that I keep it to more of a semi-gloss. The reason I'm doing that is I actually ran out of semi-gloss and I don't feel like ordering anything online at the moment. So we're going to use gloss clear. There is a flat clear as well, and there is a semi-gloss clear of this line. Vallejo does a whole line as well, and each one you got to pick for your sheen. So I want that dyed plastic look. If you remember, we talked about that in the Slaughter's Marauders series, where the green, the middle green of that scheme was actually the color they dyed all the plastic in. So I want to try and replicate that sheen with these paints because my aesthetic is looking like as if it was Hasbro that had actually made it. So I'm not looking at making it super realistic or super fictional. I want it to look like dyed plastic with some paint on it as much as I can. So that's what we're going to use. I've got another mixing cup here. So I'm going to give this a shake like everything else. And yeah, so this is kind of, hopefully I didn't jump too far into the deep end for anybody when I went right to doing Sky Patrol and using that chrome stuff. It requires some special handling, but really the application of it is no different than a lot of other paints. It is a solid color. The only thing that we took into account was that one, it wasn't acrylic, and two, because you're producing a mirror finish, you have to handle it in a certain way, and that means really not handling it that much at all and following the guidance on its application. For doing straight blocks of color, we'll be doing that in another project. This won't be the only airbrushing video series I do for you, or for us, because I enjoy this as much as hopefully you do. You'll see that when we do it with normal color and we get into masking and whatnot, that really the basic principles are still the same. All that special handling we did, modifying of the pressure and whatnot, can all be used for other projects, depending on what you want to do with the airbrush. And that's what I love about it, especially with the dual action airbrush, is that you can start to create different effects just by altering the thickness or how much thinner you've put in a paint and adjusting the air pressure either through the air compressor or through the airbrush itself, or both. It really is an exciting, versatile tool to have. And like I said, with certain things, I'll say, you know, this is the best way to do it. It's not the only way to do it. So I highly encourage you to check out YouTube. I'm not the first person to do a video on how to use an airbrush. And what I like doing is I like looking at videos of different kinds of users of an airbrush. So I won't just look at maybe someone building a model airplane or something like that. I'll watch a cake artist use it as well. Or someone who does custom auto paint jobs or whatever, just to get a more holistic, generalized view. And some people will come up with ideas that other people haven't. So it just makes you better equipped to do what you want to do with the airbrush. Most of my experience comes from the hobby world and building model airplanes, but other people might be like, oh yeah, I used to custom paint cars all the time, or hey, I'm a cake decorator, or whatever, and then go from there. So we're going to do this, call it about 50-50, maybe a little bit more, because remember, you can see kind of how runny and globby that is because it's a gloss, right? And we want to make that airbrush friendly. So right now I'm going to, from the hip, do about 50%. And I'm going to use a brush to stir that as well. Here we go. Reason being is I like my brushes. You know, and when we finish all things here, it's kind of the same thing when we talked about it, and one of my viewers commented, and I'm very grateful for that, about touching up. So if you wanted to touch up that Molotow chrome, then by all means spray some onto into a cup like this, and then brush it on if you need to. But what I've found so far is I've rarely missed, if ever, missed a spot with that sort of thing. Especially on the Mobat, it doesn't have too many deep crevices or anything like that to worry about. But you may find other projects may vary. So again, it's all about having tools in the toolbox, right? You want to take a problem and have more than one solution to it. Because maybe sometimes all those particular tools or caveats of that solution may not be available to you for whatever reason. So here we go. I'll be popping my mask back on, and now that I know that I can talk over my compressor with my mask on, I'll give you some more coaching while I go. Let's call it coaching. So there we go, I got my mask on. We're trying a different angle with the cell phone this time, so bear with me here. Going to plug in my airbrush. Which in this case means screwing it back in to the air hose. There you go, come on. The adapter is slipped down the cable there, so I had to fish it back up to the top here. And the one part I did leave soaking here. Here, I'm going to take a few seconds here to sort something out. So rather than staring at a can of, or a cup of mixed stuff there, you can look at the reflection of the chrome airbrush and the chrome tank. We're also going to be clear coating the turret too, we can't forget about that. There's my cap. Now the other thing too is when you're airbrushing this stuff, I would absolutely keep this your chromed parts as far away from your airbrushing as you can. If you can fit them in another room, I mean that might be a little bit extreme, but just to say it would hurt either. I'm just putting the cap back on here from some post airbrushing maintenance. And I'm going to take some regular X20 thinner and I'm just going to shoot it through the airbrush to make sure I've got good flow without wasting any of my prepared clear coat. Then it kind of gets the airbrush wetted a bit. I found sometimes even with pre-mixed paints, even ones that like state that they're pre-made for airbrush, sometimes just putting a little bit of thinner through the beginning or some cleaner through the beginning just kind of gets things ready, if you will. So here we go with the spray booth. And the spray brush. And I'm happy with the flow. So now I'm going to pour in my product. There we go. And the same process applies for everything else. So applying the clear coat is just like applying a paint killer, and it's just the same as it is doing it with a spray can. Right now I've got my airbrush set at about, that was too much, but I'm going to be setting it at about 20 psi, give or take. Now in this case, I'm not worried about the internal electronics of this thing for the motor, but if you are, this is when you would be masking that off to avoid getting any sort of clear coat or any other spray matter on the product itself. And I'm just going to turn on my other spray booth there. So you can see now, yeah, it's wet, but because it's glass, you can start to see the reflection of the road wheels in the hull there. So we are getting the effect we want, which is good. Now I'm going to do the other side, because this stuff dries quite quickly. And then I'll worry about flipping it over and doing the bottom half and everything else. And the other key to this is doing your best to apply the same volume of clear coat on all the parts. Because then you'll get some places that are shinier than others, and you'll have to balance that out if you want to get that nice even look. So now I'm just going to put my airbrush in my holster, so I can switch my hands around here. And you can see here, right, the glass coat is drying, if not already dried, and it gives us just a little bit of sheen there, and that's exactly what I want. And there you can see there, it's got that nice sheen that we're looking for. So the more I add to this, the more glossy it will get up to a certain point. And there we go. And just that little bit of mixing there has been enough to do the whole project in this case. So, I'm going to pour the rest out. I'm going to save this for later. And that's already dry to the touch, so we're good. And we do a sheen check, and I am very satisfied with that. Now I'm just going to run some thinner through here, and I'm going to take you through another quick airbrush cleaning session. So I put just a little bit of thinners in there, and what I'm going to show you is by plugging this with some folded up cotton, with some folded up paper towel, I'm basically going to force the air back up through the airbrush a bit. And you'll see you'll get a bubbling in there. That's actually one technique you can use to mix your paint. But I'm using it to get all the gloss coat out of there. This is just one way to do it. And it agitates all the air through the action of the airbrush. So it's almost like hitting it with, almost like using club soda on a line stain or something like that anyway. So now that I've done that, now I'm actually going to employ a product I've come to like very much, which is that Vallejo airbrush cleaner. A few squirts in there. Now in this case, normally you would see a color coming out of there, or a diluted color, but because we're using clear coat, it's a little more different than that. So, a little harder to tell. Now's a good time to check to see if there's any bubbles coming up. There's only one or two. That's all right. If there was a bunch, I would know I have a blockage in my airbrush. And I'm just going to run all that through. And now that I'm using cleaner, I'm going to bubble it up a little bit too. And that is all she wrote for the spraying portion. Now, don't think that you're done just yet. I'm just going to shut off the compressor, bleed off the excess air. Now we're going to take it apart. So, I'm going to use an alternate tool here, so don't judge. It's kind of necessary until I can locate that wrench. I'm going to show you the way to get the nozzle off without dragging the, or get the needle out without dragging it through the body of the airbrush. So I'm using some tweezers here to try and get. Oh, I think we got it. Yeah, we did! Hooray! Satisfying click of success. Yeah, hopefully there's no clicks on this thing. Yeah, so the trick is here, and I was a little hasty, in my unpacking and I did to verify that I had everything I needed. There we go. So now what I've done here, sorry, I had to do that kind of close to my hands here, is I've loosened off the nozzle. So now it's just sitting on the needle. So I'm going to remove that. Don't lose this. I broke one by accident by mishandling my airbrush, and it cost me, I'm not focused on this little piece here cost me $25 to replace. So now you can see the needle is just kind of hanging, floating inside of that socket. It's the nozzle is what basically plugs the hole at the end of the day. So now I'm going to loosen off my needle, except instead of pulling the needle out back this way, I'm going to push it through the airbrush. The reason why I do that is, let's say for example, if this was still inside the airbrush and the functioning part of the needle is basically up to there. So all the paint and thinner mix and all that stuff is all going to be on this half of the needle. It's actually better to push it through and get the rest of the needle dirty than introduce any residue into the back end of the airbrush. It makes your life a whole lot easier. So now that I've got that, there's multiple ways to do the airbrush needle cleaning. The important thing is to never use the pointy end or move it forward. And I'll show you what I mean by that in 2 seconds. So now what I've done is I've run some cleaner down this, and all I'm going to do is place it gently on the paper towel. I'm going to rotate it so that way all the thinner gets spread around, and then I'm going to draw it backwards. And what that will do is take all the paint off while also not damaging the needle, because if a needle gets a bend in it, you can technically try and bend it back to shape, but you may not get it back to the factory straightness here, and keeping this thing clean and straight is key, because this is the heart of the airbrush, is the needle. So there's that done. Now with the airbrush like this, I'm just going to disconnect the air hose. You don't have to disconnect it when you're cleaning it, but this is just I'm reaching around one of those camera stands here, so it makes my life a little easier. What you can do now, as you can see, the thinner goes right through it, the cleaner goes right through it, right? So that's kind of a good thing, and what that does is it moistens it up. And then I showed you these little white micro brushes here, and they come in different sizes and different colors. So this one's not the smallest one you can get, but it has a well, the whole thing's flexible because it's plastic, but it really helps you get down in there, because one of the places I find that's hardest to clean is right at the front of the airbrush, where the needle disappears into the nozzle area. And by taking off the nozzle, you can get right in there with one of these brushes and clean it out quite nicely, right? Anything that's at a machine like this, over time residues will build up and you want to keep it clean. Now here's the funky part, and I don't know how well this is going to show up, but I'm holding the nozzle, I promise. It's in there somewhere. You can see that there? One of these white brushes will fit inside there. So very gently just ease it in, so to speak. And now I'm cleaning the inside of the nozzle. And you can let this soak if you want, but not too long, because there's actually a little tiny gasket in there. It's rubber. It'll disintegrate or rot away or whatever. But you can see that I'm pulling off. The brush has come away colored, more colored than it was. So I'm actually getting product out of residue out of the nozzle. So that's how you clean the inside of the nozzle. Now, once the nozzle itself is clean, you can reattach it. And now that the needle itself is clean, you don't have to worry about putting the needle back in through the front. So right now I'm retightening the nozzle itself. And don't over torque it either. Most of this stuff is, I mean, you've seen how small this piece is. The whole point is to treat it with the respect that it needs. Now the needle's back in, clean. Nozzle's back on, and I already cleaned that off, so we're good. And the end cap is back on. So now that's all there is to it. We've just clear coated the model. I know the video is about half hour long, but that's just to show you the techniques being used. And something I like doing is feeling for the smoothness of the action when I'm done. If it feels gritty or sluggish in some sense, then I know I've missed something and I'll go back. The other thing that gives me a little tinge of satisfaction is hearing the cling of the action returning to the front. So there you go. You've got a cleaned airbrush. As you can see, it doesn't take much at all. And the whole point of this series has been to show you that airbrushing, while seemingly intimidating at first, is absolutely doable by anybody who wants to put the effort into it. There is a learning curve and whatnot. We've spoken about that, and I'll expand on that in my final thoughts when we conclude the project. But there's your clear coating done. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. To my subscribers, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And in the last video, we will finally assemble and we'll talk about the airbrush itself. So thanks for watching, and remember, have fun.